special one that's also deep inside the sickly, sorrowful, and lonely. Oh, I was down beneath the bottom when my vacant staring got 'em, proudly promenading like they owned the street in all its sneaking masses, freeing fumes and giving gas to the acrid and exhausted air. Like the ether or the essence of the cleansing upper atmosphere. Laughing, loving, and without a doubt, they simply strode about the streets that other creatures left alone. I ran across myself compulsive with the feeling of a pulsing drum that pounded down upon my bones. A tingling in my tangled brain was screaming that this was insane, but it also told me touch it too. And with that, I made my passage from the lonely to the chosen few. Openly, they smiled to greet me like they always do. They'd meet me with the cripples and the underfed. I knew I must appear as someone far beyond the common come on, so I could not say my name was Ed. Mr. X, who wants to come and who expects to help and guide your efforts to succeed. They laughed a little bit at me and then said, Mr. X indeed, and hugged me. Hugged me! Somehow hard, and tenderly. this thing about them that caused me at times to doubt them and created conflict in my mind. Usually there was a he one, and there also was a she one, but then they were the opposite sometimes. But one of them, when she was she, smiled and burned a hole in me, a hole that was too hard for me to hide. Once I had a dream about her, alone, in a field, outside a tiny little cottage in a store. The house was much too small to use it, so she bumped her head and bruised it, trying to get through the tiny door. Afterwards, I went to tell her, but I felt it was a he and nodded at my words like he was bored. And of course, when this would happen, there was still a she to tap upon my shoulder in a most uncommon charade. But it wasn't her that looked then, close perhaps, but like a bookend that had come misshapen from its mate. So I told myself there must be some way I can make them just be who I want to be with all the time. For it kept me at a distance, but my senses kept insisting it was much more interesting inside. Once when we were on a bus between some cities, we discussed the things that happened in their early years. Youngest time was spent alone, living with an uncle, only half remaining from a foreign war. His upper half was well enough, but in his pants, between the cuffs and where his zipper stopped, flesh had departed. So we rolled around on wheels, self-sufficient and appealing little house he'd never paint again. But it was spotless, to a point 2 feet above the floor, and warmth was in the grin upon his chin. That they met were few, and might have been disturbed by two who looked so strange and oddly intertwined. But living with their stumpy uncle, who was unconcerned and rumpled, simply made them clueless to their kind. They thought that we were put together randomly, just like the weather, with no uniformity in mind. That vision only lasted for a while until he passed away and they were sent off to a home. The children there did not have parents, were all alike and always staring at the two who never were alone. And so they cried and then withdrew from those who shouted, laughed, and who made misery a value to condone. Once outside, they heard some children shouting that a car had killed one of their pets out in the road ahead. As they approached the fallen dog, some blood appeared, and then they saw its quivering and disconnected leg. So they kneeled upon the ground and lifted up the leg they found and wedged it down below their necks, where their bodies were united. Then the sun, which had been blinding, winked, and in a moment, all was dark. Suddenly, the air was still, as apprehension filled the moment like the shadows of a shark. But when the sun returned above them, no one laughed or made fun of them, for the barking dog had been reborn, running free and resurrected, causing them to be respected by those who had avoided them before. As I begged and then implored, they told me other childhood stories, while never quite conceding me access to the Holy Union, which was somehow near and looming just beyond the end of my reach. For they had a way of keeping it aloof, while never seeming even vaguely rude or incorrect. Then one day it finally happened. Just before they took a nap, we joked around the room in which they slept. They were laughing at a problem where I hustled out some slob who screamed that they were phonies, fakes, and liars. They snickered at my righteous rage and said that I should act my age, or else they'd have to hold me back next time. I laughed and said that it would take more than just two freaks to make me stop if someone bothered them again. Then at once, we started shoving back and forth until a sudden move caught me completely off my guard. Quickly, they surrounded me. Inside a wall of flesh, I found my only freedom rested in a hand that dangled up and down between their sides until I jerked and seemed to watch it flutter down upon their bars. the room that clearly was not there before. Looking up, we all connected in a triangle of eyes, reflecting tension and unsaid excitement too. Soon it passed in nervous laughter, but I felt a change. Soon after, we unlocked our limbs and I withdrew. Pushed them through the towns and through the bushes, and the word was spreading like a whore. Come and see the holy twosome. They can heal and they can do some things no one ever did before. So they came for holy healing, both the belching and the squealing, and the ones that maybe just were bored. Silently, I stood between them, holding up the crimson gleaming circle with its ends not quite in line. Then I lifted up the cover, softly like it was my lover, and I felt them shudder as they sighed. As I clamped the metal on it, something like a liquid donut shimmered by the Holy Union's side. Then the people screamed and shouted as the donut grew and sprouted, little bitty dust balls made of fire. These then soon enough descended down the lines that finally ended at the screams and unbelieving cries. For soon the cripples would be walking and the dummies would be talking, but no one knew exactly how or why. Staying at the fireplace, thinking of my own desire, which seemed to be a hole of hurt and harm, when I heard a little giggle. Sounded like some silly piglets playing in the mud so soft and warm. So I went and looked around, and from the bathroom door I found some sounds that had not come from there before. "Come on out," I shouted. Soon their faces full of doubt peeked at me from the newly opened door. They said that they were having fun with something that someone had left inside a little leather pouch. "Let me see," I said, and took it with a snatch that left a crooked smile across the corner of my mouth. It was a smooth and shiny object with a purpose and a job I recognized and easily defined. Looking up, I saw one pair of eyes that boldly stabbed and stared deep into the secrets of my mind. I knew it once. It was the she thing, not the they, and not the he thing, looking back at me in my desire. Inflamed, I reached and pulled her close, but then I had them both off balance, and we fell into a pile of quivering and awkward bodies, arms and legs and elbows caught beneath the rat and in between us all. And said that we should soon discuss the object, which was unidentified. I left them with a lame excuse, but if I was to tell the truth, I was confused. I was confused by what I felt inside. The following day, I did some walking for my mind did too much talking to itself and left me feeling torn. I thought of our last episode and how it ruptured and eroded feelings from my closely guarded core. Also then, I knew corruption leaked into this last eruption and its oily odor stained my mind. Long ago, I knew that I was sly perhaps and not too nice, but underneath, I thought my goals sublime. But now, how could I tolerate behavior that could suffocate innocence that could not be renewed? Desire conflicted in my mind with thoughts I once had found divine, and torment twisted me between the two. Aimlessly, I slowly wandered as my footsteps took me onward, painfully conflicted and confused. Soon I found myself distracted by a window that attracted barbers to a display of their wares. And what was underneath my stare was silvery sharp and could not care about confusion or about despair. It only had one job to do, and since I knew it cut so true, the chaos in my mind was clarified. So I went inside and bought it from a man who never caught the tingle that it raised along my spine. Electrically, a pleasant tension, like a liquid in suspension, lifted up my spirits like a gift. Now my feeling was well-being, but I could not help from seeing that my hands were shaking as I left. Walking home, my thoughts returned to what I told him we had learned, but much of what occurred remained unsaid. Yes, it was a lie I told them, not to help, but just to hold them with me. But what I really should have said is lies can often bring you power, like a coffin filled with flowers, gives life to the living, but not the dead. While they were eating supper at the table, sitting side by side upon their special stool. So I said when they were finished with their whole wheat toast and spinach, we should go back to the secret room that had only been constructed recently to be conductive to the force that grew around the twins. Once inside, we all admired its silver gleaming pointed spire that raised its crystal crown into the wind. Up and up towards the ceiling, gracefully it stretched, not yielding to the confines of the smallish room. For it pierced an open circle and disappeared into the murky night that held its apex like a plume. The room had been an inspiration of a twins that I had taken, building it of wood and tile and chrome, and they would sit inside for hours as the rain dripped down the tower, sitting on a bench, just two alone. But this time, we were not there for inspiration, but to bear our other sides and feel the kiss of flesh. Take your clothes off, I commanded, like a bold and common bandit, basking in a cool, controlling feeling. I was standing back behind them with a length of line to tie them once their nakedness had been revealed. Kneel, I said, becoming heated, for the task had been completed, and I felt my goals drawing near. Then I heard a little snicker. What was that? I said, and giggles swarmed around me like a storm. Stop it, stop it, stop, I said. But they seemed to spread and spread. Stop it, or I won't show you anymore.
We can't believe that you're so dumb to think we needed anyone to show us what we've always known about.
What? I screamed in disbelief, so certain that I was the thief that took away their purity. I shouted, but what about the other night? When she and I were locked so tight, and the laughter drowned me out, and so I stopped.
What makes you think it was her?
The mocking voices said with words that cut me like a gutted frog, but I know it must have been because I smelled her heated skin and
Don't you see there is no she now? Don't you see there is no she now? Don't you see there is no she now?
face too loud. So I reached into my pocket, and a feeling like a shock exuded from my fingertips and found a path around and up my butt and focused just below my gut. Made me hold my breath before the blade could fall at last and finally free me from the anger and the screaming radiating from my raging face. So I slit the Holy Union, turning it into a wound, gaped apart and bled upon the ground, causing me to fire my passion as I stared into the gash that quivered like a disemboweled trout. So great upon my throbbing penis was the pull toward this Venus that there were no thoughts inside my mind, only all-consuming lust to be inflamed in base discussion. Tell about it while I came inside. So I slipped my dick into it, thrusting into pain, spewing blood around the room and in my face, causing me to fuck it harder. Deep and fast I pushed apart the shoulders that were down below my waist. Screams were ripping up the air as eyes rolled back and teeth were bared. My lips were stretched too tight and could not cry. There could be but one conclusion to this sick, distorted fusion. And of course it came, and so did I. Madly, with my face contorted, I reached down and pushed apart their bodies just before I lost control, causing me to hear a sicky sound of fleshy splitting as I drifted towards a big black hole. But just before I hit the floor, I noticed one was rolling over, showing me a smooth, unblemished thigh that ended in a red eruption just below her belly button. But maybe it was only in my mind. Maybe it was only in my mind. Maybe it was only in my mind. So my story winds on down towards an ending that I found acceptable, but some might disagree. I've lived my life and taken chances, and if some were strange by standards that were less important than my needs, well, I guess I could be seen as crooked, evil, bent, and twisted, looking down upon the strings I tried to pull. But I see the strings extended up and down and never ended as we dance around ourselves like fools to the tunes that only we hear, and the voices only we fear, each inside a solitary island. But the contact that we do make as we give and take abuse stays, and its value only multiplies. I'm alone, but not forgotten. For each comes and sees me often, sitting on a stool shaped like a heart. And we laugh and reminisce about a life that once was bliss before an act of passion made us part. Yeah, they're still together, but their bond is made of leather, not the flesh and blood it used to be. They're full of life and healing, but it has a different feeling. And only for the few that have the need of pain and pleasure when they merge, indulging in insistent urgency that only lives for seconds at a time. For pain and pleasure are the twins that slightly out of focus spin around us till we finally realize that everything that gives us pleasure also gives us pain to measure it by. And in order to survive all our lives, we love illusion, neatly caught between confusion and the need to know we are alive.
One, two, one, two, three.